Further endorsement for you, Drew. So
yeah, I would agree with that. It's quite challenging. They have a lot of prerequisites, and they govern the licenses afterwards. There's a lot of agencies that don't govern your licenses and have a code of conduct standard that the NWFA has.
Yeah, I agree. So there is a sort of an outline of what we're going to look at as we go through this. It's very much conversational. I think it's absolutely appropriate if, even though I've said save your questions for the end, if you think there's something topical as we discuss this, you in the audience have something to say, please, do that. Either type it in or you can speak up. Let's make this as conversational as possible. Drew, first question to you. How many inspectors are in North America and Canada? What do you know about that topic? And can you kind of separate the wheat from the chaff a little bit with an explanation?
Yeah, I can. I don't know the exact number, and I don't think anybody does, because there's all these different agencies that are encompassing it. Some people say there's over 600. I think the last time Clayton and I were talking, we kind of agreed that there could be upwards of 1,000 if you take in all the different certifications that are out there. And we're talking flooring certifications, not just hardwoods or even the ceramic tile industry, the carpet industry. We've got to bring all that to the table here too. There's different types of certifications. We've already mentioned the NWFA, and there's other certifications out there that basically you just write a test online and they send you a certificate saying you're certified. Now, is that really education? Is that really being certified? Technically, one could argue that absolutely it is, but does that make the person knowledgeable in what they're doing? Versus these other the other certification associations that actually do training, continue education credits, and govern your actions afterwards.
Yeah, I think someone like yourself, all you three guys probably have been going to school on this subject for the entire time you've been doing it. There's
one more thing I'd just like to add about certifications. So whether the number is 600 or 1,000, that doesn't really matter. How many are practicing inspectors that are unbiased, that do it for a living? There are inspectors that are certified by virtue of what they do. Let's say they're a warranty services, they're a claims analyst for their manufacturer, the company they work for. That's fine to be certified, and that's fine to be able to challenge inspectors, to review claims, but are they independent? No. How about all the inspectors that do this part-time? They say it's a side job. Well, I do 3 or 4 inspections a year, but I'm an installer or I run a store. Well, how much experience can you get when you're only doing a handful of inspections a year versus the guy that does it full-time for a living?
One misplaced word in a report and you've tipped the balance unfairly. You've got to be so careful. One of the things we absolutely acknowledge when we assign files to inspectors across Canada, we're very picky about who's going to get that file. It's not just about certification, it's about experience. And you're as good as your last report, right?
Yeah, that's the saying in the business. And so looking for those inspectors that have written a bad report, that hangs over them for a long time.
Absolutely, yeah. And so if there's around 1,000 or so across North America, you might take the 1 in 10 ratio that seems to separate the US from Canada and say maybe there's 100 across Canada.
That'd be about 100 that are really full-time.
Right.
Invested into just inspecting only versus doing something else.
And so of those 100, take a stab at how many might be, out of the good, better, best scenario. Good such that you would send them into that scenario where you've got a hospital, bubbled flooring, architect, general contractor, flooring contractor, manufacturer, owner, all fallen out, hundreds of thousands of dollars on the hook. Who are you going to send? There's not many.
You shop around for the cheapest guy and look for $150 inspector.
Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Think of the money I could save.
That does happen, by the way. I've seen some inspections as low as $50.
Oh my God.
And you know what you're getting is about 2 lines. Opinion only, that's it. And they're putting in the writing without any evidence to back up anything.
We had Julian Forsyth on the call, on the education yesterday. And I know today he flew to Yellowknife,
Wow.
manufacturer and flooring contractor, trying to figure out who's responsible for 100,000 square feet of issue. And off he goes to try and be that voice of reason, facts, truths. So.
Now, we're as inspectors, I think we're more like scientists. We're really trying to gather evidence from the flooring that doesn't lie. That evidence is there. It's just a matter of being able to gather that information and document it.
Right.
So
and not everybody's a scientific mind where they love digging into the facts
no, there have been inspectors I've noticed. I was challenged in one inspection, one inspector had 50 years experience, and he just doesn't. He just has his hands in his pockets. Says I call them armchair inspectors. They just don't do it. They don't get down and look. You have to gather the evidence to support your
This is a probably
findings.
good segue to go into this topic of court, because when an inspector goes on site, and I brought this up, Chris, because you mentioned Julian going up to Yellowknife to figure something out. And what Julian's going to do up there, he's either going to cause a lawsuit, stop a lawsuit, or redirect a lawsuit with his findings or his conclusion.
Well said.
And then to tie in what Clayton just said is the evidence is in the floor and you got to go find the evidence. So I'm just trying to tie in of what we've spoken about only in the first 11 minutes of this call about how important it is to go and get it right, because somebody is going to be holding the hook.
Right. And if you
On the
can,
hook for this.
like often we get a phone call at the association here. I want an inspection and I want him to go at this time. And I say, whoa, wait. First of all, we recommend that you go talk to your construction group and have everybody come to the table and pay a little bit for this inspection. Then everybody's invested in the outcome. And that starts a conversation off that is much more healthy, rather than, what it's like the commissioner that hires you just wants to use you as a bat to get their way. And so we say, try and get everybody on the same page and then deliver these hard truths. Big companies have money set aside to deal with claims, but no one is going to shell out $30,000 if you can't prove it's their responsibility. But if you can, it frees things up. No, it's not going to happen in every case, but this is the importance of having a sort of a transparent approach to these things. And then when you go to court, like you say, Drew, it's going to be slightly different flavor.
Well, let me throw out something else to the other two gentlemen on the call here. And I think we've all heard on, let's hire an inspector and we'll live by that report. And I think that's a dangerous edge to go on, because how do you know that report's going to be right?
Yeah. I
think you should live by a report that's correct, not by the guy that you hire. You see the difference that I'm trying to come up with here?
Yeah.
Is if all parties agree on an inspector, that's good. Now the inspector's job is to make a conclusion that is supported by facts and evidence, not for all parties to say, let's hire an inspector and we'll all agree to live by his conclusion.
Yeah.
Well, you see where that one can go. Scott, Clayton, do you have any input on that comment?
I would say there's a difference too between finding the conclusion and finding the cause. Sometimes the conclusion is very evident because you see the floor is cupped, you know what causes that, but what's the cause? And if you go in and do an inspection, depending on conditions and how much they're going to allow you to dig into the issue, sometimes you can come away with that with an inconclusive cause. You cannot pinpoint exactly when and who caused the problem. It could have been either party. So we'll live by the inspector's report can be a two-edged sword.
Yeah, and there are some manufacturers out there that do not live by the conclusion of the report. They wait till they get the report and read it to see if it's supported, not to see if they agree with it, to see if it's containing the evidence they need. So there's some manufacturers that won't go by that rule.
Enough information to deny the claim, because there isn't a perfect installer out there. So there's always, you're going to find something that's wrong, and that's all they need to deny the claim, even though they might have a problem with their product.
Well, there are certifying agencies out there that are teaching their inspectors to look for ways for the manufacturer to decline. Now, any good inspector that I speak with does not agree with that, I'm going to call it attitude or approach, and they won't embark on that. They will still do their independent, they'll still speak the truth about the floor.
Yeah, the saying is we report, basically our conclusions are based on what's right, not who's right.
That's a good
Perfect line.
point.
I love it.
Yeah, really good point. Yeah. I just say to any flooring dealers, anyone out there, if there's a report that they've seen that just doesn't look believable, they usually have a gut feeling about something, doesn't look right. Hire your own inspector, hire an experienced inspector to provide
Well,
another opinion.
on that point, what we recommend, I mean, I guess it might be seen as we would say this, wouldn't we? But we do encourage you to hire an inspector through an association, either ours as the national or local association. It decouples the perceived bias. So if you're a harmed homeowner with a cupped hardwood floor and you hire Scott Vitus directly, the potential is if it ends up in court that the judge is going to see that as a biased report. But if you hire through the local flooring association or through us, then it decouples it. Do you agree with that?
I would say that the biasness has to be read into the report. Yet I read a lot of reports and you can read them going, well, this guy is biased towards one party because there's so many things that have been overlooked. So my issue is when you have two inspectors on the same floor and investigating the same concerns and the reports are different. And now we get into your inspector and my inspector. And I don't like hearing those terms because they don't own me. I represent the floor, not the commissioning party or the people.
And I don't like either report. Let's get another one.
Yeah. But which report is actually supported by a conclusion?
Yeah.
Supported, not just mentions in a conclusion. Which one is showing that it's right, where a layperson can read this and say, yes, the dots add up. And that's what I'm trying to teach inspectors to do, whether you're a veteran inspector or a new inspector, is let's go out and investigate, collect evidence to support our conclusion. Sometimes this takes hours or days to do. I can see Clayton going, yep.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of research to do.
It just takes me a day just to gather installation instructions and what type of adhesive was used on one job. It's taking me that long already. I'm waiting.
And then your evidence would go in the way, what was used, what should have been used, and what went wrong.
Yeah, because it is critical. Everything is based on what should have been used and what the instructions say, and how everything, how the product behaves based on all that information, right? So
back to the idea of two inspectors reporting on the same project in short order because the first report wasn't liked or whatever. It's not a great solution, but when we assign files to certified inspectors, we will not assign another certified inspector. Once we know that one guy has been on site or girl, it's done. We won't go back there. Now, that doesn't really help if the certified inspector is no good at what he did or does, the first one, but it just stops us in that keep on reporting until we get the right message that we want or the right conclusions.
But I agree with you, Chris, that this is where you get your quality assurance with the inspector by going, the inspector, they're good, they can collect evidence. And even if you keep who's the commissioning party out of this, doesn't matter. You've got these involved people, which could be 2, it could be 6.
Yeah.
A manufacturer, an installer, a homeowner, a builder, it could be anybody. Keep those parties out and investigate unfairly through an association.
Had a distributor phone us and said, we want another inspection on this project. And I said, another? You've already had one? Yep, we did a terrible job. And the person was certified, and I had to say, no, we will not go back. What do you mean we won't? The report's obviously rubbish. And it's, well, sorry, we can't. You should have come to the association first. Then we would have put your file in touch with someone who knows what they're doing and knows how to handle a case like this. Each case is different, right? I mean, We have hardwood experts, we have resilient experts, we have, you know, all sorts of different facets in the flooring industry. So we hand select every file, every inspector for each file. I'm going to change the slide here. We've sort of talked about some of this stuff. What makes a good inspector? Experience, right? Doing, how many reports have you done, Clayton?
6,000
6,000. I mean,
and counting.
it's all about experience.
And that gives you enough information to know that I don't know everything. I admit that. I looked at you have to look at every inspection as something new and unique, and you have to look at it that way from scratch.
I've always said three things, like the ability to write a good report, certification, experience. Actually, it's four things: experience and being able to keep their mouth shut on site. Just allow the report to do the talking. Sorry, Mr. Commissioner, I can't give you conclusions here. You'll get a report in about a week's time. They'll deliver it. So.
Yeah, I know when I took that first course as a carpet inspector course, I knew after I passed it that, you know, this is just the beginning. Is this enough to get me into trouble? I just didn't have the experience. And I started getting out there, and this, you know, after 100 inspections, I started to know a little bit more, and 1,000. Yeah, I still don't know everything. 5,000 later, it's, you know, I still know. I still have to view every single inspection as it's unique. It has to be, you know, you have to look at the evidence for every single floor separately.
That's the key point that you just said there, Clayton, and I agree with you 100%. Every inspection is different, and so a lot of new inspectors, they cut and paste reports. They keep reports and they use it forward for, oh, I've seen this before. Well, I don't think a doctor does that. I think a doctor would look at each person individually in case there's something different.
Yeah. What sort of time? I mean, it's a question that's like, how long is a piece of string? But what's the average time that you guys spend on a report on site? If it's a home, let's say a typical single family dwelling, 3,000 square feet, you're an hour on site, 2 hours on site, 3 hours writing the report.
Carpet would take me about an hour, hour and a half on site, and hardwood could take, you know, 2 to 3 hours, depending on if it's around up to 3,000 square feet. Commercial it goes up higher. It's longer, more time. You're running down corridors, checking every corridor sometimes.
And how about writing the report?
Oh, it's I hate to say it. It takes hours and hours. Just gathering the basic information first, and then sitting down to it and taking those photographs and being able to explain everything. I justify just about everything that I say with photographs. The meter that I use is not something invisible. I'm showing my meter in action with a photograph. That's, yeah, there's this straight edge you see in the picture. So that's can you see that camera on the floor? That's going to take a picture of the entire straight edge from one end to the other end with that ruler right beside it, without my hand there. It's going to take a picture of that whole thing. So it'll show that's the freestanding straight edge and with the actual measurement of that gap space. And that's the evidence. It's, how do you argue with that? That's visible, clear evidence. That shows what that section of floor looks like.
As a result, there's $20,000 worth of flattening needs to be done. You're going to get pushback if there's holes in your opinion or your writing, right?
I've had to do inspections just doing that, and it clears up all the noise. It solves the problem right there when you have photographs that prove what it's actually like. How can they argue against it?
Can I give you an example of what Clayton's doing there?
Yeah, please.
That I agree with what he's doing. He's collecting evidence that's basically undisputable. So he's not only writing it in his report, he's showing photos what support his text. But I have read in a report that the inspector goes out and measured a 1.5 millimeter lippage difference with his foot. He wrote that in the report. He says, with my foot, I felt 1.5 millimeters difference. So I'm only bringing this example up to show the audience that there's Clayton's way of doing it to support your conclusion. And the other inspector, well, he did a test, but how he concluded it was 1.5 millimeters, to me, I guess that was an opinion, but that was a true fact. I had that written in a report that I've read.
Maybe his foot was calibrated?
Must have been, he must have been damn good, better than me, because I would have to get down and measure that with a feeler gauge. He's able to do it from a standing position with his foot. He must be better. And he was on the job for 20 minutes on the job site.
Yeah, that happens. I guess it's
No,
It's
it
just
does
an
happen.
example
It
of
happens a lot
people.
more often than you think.
right.
I
It
seen one
does.
inspector
It
appear for
does.
five minutes. Oh, the guy was only here for 5 minutes and wrote a report and ended up having to go to Victoria to solve the problem, to inspect these rooms. It happens. And another case where there's buckling in the floor. I said to the homeowner, I said, where he said he was from Whistler. I said, no, that's what he said he was from. I said, well, I checked him out. He's actually from Vancouver Island. How long was he in here? 15 minutes. See, he was rushing this inspection so he could catch that 10 o'clock ferry back to Nanaimo, wherever he was from.
Yeah, giving inspectors a bad name.
Yeah.
What are the benefits? Well, we've talked about getting warring parties off the hook. Anybody have any other input on that subject?
Well, I think a key to a good inspector is having to remain as a third party. It is a trained trait, and any new inspector coming onto the scene will be making this mistake somewhere, and hopefully they improve, of trying to support the person who's paying them. And that is something that the inspectors have to get out. You're a third party, and I like to say you're representing the floor. That's who you're representing.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way
And
of putting
then
it.
you are a third party. The other way of looking at the benefits of a third party and how you can act as a third party is, will my report be the same if another party hired me? So if the homeowner hired me, if the installer hired me, would my report be the same? The answer should be yes.
Absolutely.
So first of all, the inspector has to truly be unbiased and a third party digging up, and then it has its benefits.
I get calls quite often. I want to be an inspector. What do I have to do to join your organization? And I said, you don't. No inspector belongs to an FCA. You're all independent. It's an important point to make. Mystery solved. Well, have you had any? I recently had a file where, because I do inspections as well, and I did not know how to deliver the conclusions. I was stuck betwixt and between on what I should do, and I phoned the players involved, and from those phone calls and just talking with those involved, I got a critical piece of information which absolutely swung the arrow of I don't want to say blame, but it helped us. It's going to help everybody involved get off the hook. And if I hadn't made that phone call, I don't know what I would have done. It was one more report that goes out. Sorry, can't solve this for you, but here's some of the facts.
Well,
Yeah,
here's
it's like-
another interesting part about solving a flooring dispute or a flooring problem. I say this in all my training courses. Diagnose before you prescribe. Figure out what's going on before you do a repair. So not only pointing the finger at who's responsible. For anybody on this call who's a manufacturer, how many times have you paid out a claim that wasn't your fault? Not because you paid it out of goodwill, but as like you didn't identify the moisture issue. So every single spring, this floor is going to fail because you didn't figure out the cause, or the cause wasn't figured out properly before the floor was repaired or replaced. These are important things to come up with, and I'm going to tie in what was said earlier about what Scott said about there's a difference between a conclusion and a cause, and there absolutely is. Scott's correct, and I think we have to diagnose before we prescribe.
Yeah.
That's another takeaway phrase.
100%. What testing do you guys do on site? What do you consider part of your scope when it comes to testing? It's a lot of.
Well, that's an interesting point. And I'm going to start that off by only testing and investigating what you are there for, what the commissioning party's complaint is. To tie into what you mentioned before, but well, what testing do we do? How long do we spend on an inspection? Well, if I'm on an inspection for one complaint, noisy. Well, that's different. If I'm there for noisy buckling, lifting, cupping, uneven surface, they're all different tests that have to be done. So I remember I flew out to Regina, and it was a very popular person that owned this house. And I was there for a scratching complaint. And I walked in, and the floor's all cupped. Whoa, I'm here for a scratching complaint, and this is all cupped. And that's all I report on. That's all I investigate and report on. And there's other inspectors out there that take up their hour. If they're on a grading complaint, why are they taking measurements on the expansion space or nailing schedule? It's a grading complaint. We're not throwing the installer underneath the bus for his nailing schedule on a grading complaint. So only investigate what you are there to do and nothing else.
Yeah.
And for those people who hire inspectors, the important message in this is be specific of what you're telling the inspector to look for.
Yeah.
When I see something like cupping, then I'd probably phone the manufacturer and find out, or whoever hired me, to find out, you know, whether this cupping should be addressed or not. And then there'll be probably an additional charge because it takes more time to report on it.
And that's fine too, as an inspector, to collect the information, collect the data while you're there, make a phone call to your commissioning party. So if I'm hired by a manufacturer or distributor on one item, and I phoned them up and I say, hey, did you know this was going on? Would you like me to add this to the report? 50%, they say, yes, please. Sometimes they say, no, thanks.
Clayton, when you go on a QAP project, what testing do you do in that regard?
Oh, I use a straight edge on random areas. That 10-foot straight edge, I go around, do that. I do porosity tests. I do moisture content tests with using the concrete moisture meter. I'm checking ambient conditions, so the thermal hygrometer. Those are the basic things that I can do while I'm there.
You're not taking ASTM moisture tests like drill tests or calcium chloride.
No, I said I follow up and make sure that the general contractor or building owner gets that done. So
then you would verify the results.
Yeah, and from a third-party moisture testing agency.
Yeah.
It's certified to do that kind of work.
And what about calibration? Scott, calibrating tools, how important is that?
Using companies like Imbotech in Toronto or whatnot. Yeah, I have to send out the meters every now and then to get them recalibrated and verified that they're keeping track. I do have multiple over the years that I've collected, so at least I don't have any downtime when one's at the shop. But it's important to make sure you can also verify yourself if you have multiple meters to see that you're getting the same readings on with across the board. I have 3 hygrometers, and change the batteries in them regularly as well. That's an important thing. One of the things that I see all the time, and it makes my skin crawl, is when I have a photo in a report of somebody holding the hygrometer in their hand and taking a picture of it and saying, well, the humidity level was high. But most sling psychrometers will adjust to the humidity coming off your body and can throw that reading off by 5% easily just by holding it. So there's a couple of things like that as well that are quite important.
Or breathing close to it, just your breath alone, and spike the humidity numbers. So yeah, and there are tools that you can use to do calibration checks yourself.
Yeah, but that's not the same as a factory calibration.
No, but if you're finding that your calibration checks so that your meters aren't working properly, then you have to send them out. Now it's time.
Right. So you can do your calibration check before and after, but I still think on an annual basis, as a full-time inspector, your meter should be factory calibrated, and you get a certification for that serial number meter. And that's what our commissioning parties are looking for.
I'm going to, we had a comment on the chat here. Hopefully, person whose name is C. Sonego.
Carl Sonego.
Carl Sonego. Well, welcome to the call, Carl. I just wondered if you wanted to just weigh in here. You brought up an important point that you do not accept by default an inspector's report. Do you have a scenario you're thinking of, or did you want to expand on that? You might not be able to hear me. No. Okay. Let's see what the next slide does to us. Biggest issues you guys run into. Silence.
There's so many.
Okay, I'll start this off with a big issue that I run into. I run into issues with installation instructions being either incorrect, incomplete, outdated, or where the installer has a different set of instructions than what's available online. And all these you kind of put into one basket, because as inspectors, we're trained to always follow manufacturer's instructions. But then I pull these instructions and the manufacturer tells me to use the wrong fastener or the wrong notch trowel, or doesn't say to take moisture readings. And I've got a basket full of instructions here that are incorrect. So one of the issues that I run into is when I'm trying to say, well, this wasn't done. Well, the instructions don't say to do that. Yeah, you can kind of tie in WFA or other agencies, but when it comes to a resilient inspection, there's a lot of instructions out there where it's saying, yeah, whack my SPC core with a mallet to install it. Okay, that shouldn't be done. But the instructions say to do that.
There could be 4 or 5 editions of those instructions. So you have to ask for the instructions that they came in actual that box.
Correct.
And not
what's
what's
available
online.
to the installer at the time of the installation. That's the
That's right.
instructions you're looking
From the
for.
install period.
Yeah.
You have to, if it was installed 5 years ago, you need the instructions from 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Not the ones today that fixed all those errors because they've had the same complaints over the last 4 years.
And some of these cartons don't come with instructions at all.
No.
There are manufacturers out there, which I think is kind of smart in today's day and age. If they put a QR code or a website on their box and say, for the instructions of this material, our current instructions are online. Are there installers out there that don't have a smartphone? Very rare, very rare. And if they can't read, they're not going to be able to read the instructions anyways. Like if English is a second language, for example. So I think that's
They're going to
you
use
get
the
an instant
pads
update.
if we don't put the instructions in.
Oh, Chris, Carl.
Hello, guys.
Hello, Carl.
Like, well, I had to walk away for a moment, but we're back to
Not because of what you were hearing, hopefully.
well, sure, actually. But anyway, our company does not by default expect to accept an inspector's report because as Drew knows, I am a certified inspector, and like some of the reports we get are just horrible. They're biased. They don't have any call it supporting evidence.
Credibility.
So we will turn those away and employ our own inspectors where possible. And again, as mentioned earlier, the problem is trying to find actually qualified inspectors in certain areas of Canada is very difficult. And excuse my laryngitis, I've been struggling with this for days. But again, I've got enough experience to kind of filter through stuff. And like realistically, some of the stuff we get is just like absolute crap
Yeah.
in terms of um, determining what is actually going wrong with the problem.
That's good to know that you don't just by default accept the report. You're critical of it. And I think-
Well, always, because we don't want to just throw material at a job and replace a job only to have the same thing happen again.
Yeah.
It doesn't make anybody happy. It doesn't make the consumer happy. It doesn't make the dealer happy. It doesn't make us happy. It doesn't make our vendor happy.
So I think if I got my wish list for Christmas, it would be 2 or 3 excellent inspectors in each province that folks like yourself could call upon and know that they're going to get a consistent quality product back.
Yeah, no, well, that would be great, but I can't cover 3 continents, unfortunately, as our company does. But like I said, we look at it and we examine the evidence, and like we have to base our evaluation on what ultimately the facts are presented to us. Call it speculation means nothing. We
Good.
can all guess at what happened. What we want is to know what happened.
Yeah. So we need to identify the percentage of inspectors out there that are going to be able to do that. We'll stand a better chance. Let's move on to Carl. Thank you very much for your input. That's really interesting and good stuff. I just wanted to.
I just want to make one more thing. There is a particular call it certification body that they provide these courses to certify people, and literally I registered my cat and they accepted the application for my cat, and all I had to do was pay the fee and they would have processed the application for my cat. Now, mind you, my cat would have had to pass the examination, but there is no barrier to entry. This is the difference between the NWFA, the IRCRC, and the other respectable associations.
If there's any comfort, Carl, we would not have hired your cat because it wouldn't have had the experience.
Yeah, the thing is, the cat, we also included the day, but this particular association, all I had to do was send the money.
Yeah.
And my cat could have attended the.
That is one of the issues the industry has to deal with. And, I think by creating a platform like this and sort of helping the industry better understand what inspectors are all about, and that there are many out there that there's good, better, best, we will move towards solving that issue. But Carl, thanks again for your input. That's great.
Gentlemen, just to let you know that there's just under 15 minutes left.
Okay, Jordan Vogt, you're out there. You've just asked a question. As an installer, it's a very good question because I see it myself. It's very difficult for an inspector to rule against the manufacturer's product because you're not actually doing destructive or laboratory testing. You're recommending maybe a third-party testing agency to do that, but it's very difficult. I mean, I'd get interested to get your opinion. Jordan, did you want to ask this question literally? If you can hear me.
Hey, Chris. I'm just standing outside waiting to pick my daughter up from school, so I may need to go. But
Manitoba.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I might have to run here, but yeah, I've run into a lot of claims where it's pretty. I read these FCITS reports or whichever other certifying body is there, whoever the manufacturer sent, and then you've been around the block a few times and you read this thing, you're like, I don't think that's what's going on here. I've seen manufacturing related issues that do this, and I think that's more likely. but the case is closed, and you know, you have some difficulty swallowing some of the explanations there when you're on the hook for the bill. And I wonder, how does a good inspector have their spidey senses go off and say, well, yeah, I guess this could be caused by some environmental conditions, but how do we, from a dealer perspective, how do we ensure that there are more investigation done to rule out manufacturer defect issues? And there are some product categories that I think that have a much higher degree of that. I mean, the one I mentioned, like planar instability in carpet tile, you know, I've had that one, you know, literally blamed on a lack of primer when all the bond was good everywhere. And I had plywood ripping off the substrate because the bond was so good, but because primer wasn't used, we had a claim denied. You know, like some of those things, you get into the weeds, you're looking for a real answer, not just a getaway. So how does an inspector decide what to do there?
Got it. So essentially, how do we avoid just dumping on the installer because it's easy? Unless, of course, it's right. Drew, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I could add some to that. And Jordan, thank you very much for your question. And I agree with your concerns and the situation that you're in there. That I'm just going to go on record right now and saying there's no such thing as a perfect install, like an absolute perfect by the book install. And a good inspector is not going to go in there and look to say, oh, what was not done? It has to relate to, it has to cause the issue or the concern coming up. And, you know, this is one reason why I embarked personally upon training to help some of these inspectors become better and do a proper investigation. And let's hit the nail on the head. Let's not just go in and look to say, oh, there was no primer used, and we'll use that as a conclusion. Now, there are some certifying agencies out there that are training their inspectors to do that. But this is where you have to know who are the good inspectors in your town and your neighborhood. Go through NFCA, go through Chris to find a good inspector and unbiased. You're only as good as your bad report. We've talked about all this. And I'm sorry that happens. I don't think we can control it as the industry, though. I can only control my own actions. I can't control the actions of others. But this is where, at the end of the day, the inspector is going to come back and say, lack of primer. Somebody is going to argue back, say, well, that's not causing it. Yes, that might be a mistake, but it's not causing it. How does that help your case? It doesn't. So I'm sorry, other than getting in a trained inspector. Clayton's the type of guy that goes in there and investigates until he finds it. And that's the kind of guy that you need. And I hope you have one in Manitoba there in your area where you don't have to fly somebody in when you have a claim or when the manufacturer hires this person.
And if you can't prove it, you don't write it in the report. You don't deliver conclusions.
Excellent point. And actually, Jordan mentioned that too, that, you know, speculation. If you're going to write something speculative in a report, write it so it is speculative. So say, I don't know, it could be this or that. Destructive testing would be necessary. It was reported this was used, but it can't be proven. Write that in the report so all the readers of that report know what you're questioning as an inspector, what you're able to prove, rather than saying as an inspector, oh, yeah, wrong trowel was used. How do you know? Did you pull a board? Did you see it? No. Then don't write that. So there's creative ways of writing a report that's still supportive, and some things cannot be seen without destructive testing.
Good points. Let's see what else we got going on here. Incorrect maintenance. Jordan, thanks for the question there, pal. Good luck with your kids picking them up. Incorrect maintenance. Yeah, I think, is this not what drives most inspections out there? Carpet related or maintenance issues and carpet? Or is there another category of inspections that is larger than that? Where do you get most of your inspections from? Carpet manufacturers saying, please go and inspect and report on this. We've got a customer saying there's a big blotch in the middle of their carpet. Isn't that what drives the inspection industry?
Well, maintenance could also refer to humidity conditions too for regarding hardwood flooring and other products like that. But you know, you're thinking about cleaning maintenance, then yeah, that is an issue with a lot of carpet. Yeah, I see it a lot.
Like if you do 20 inspections in a month, Clayton, what's the
Oh,
lion's
for
share?
number one with carpet, number one problem with carpet is performance. How that yarn performs under just normal foot traffic or vacuuming.
So when it flattens down, or whether it,
That's right, but you know, they have all these exclusions, you know, they can handle flatten all carpet flattens out eventually. But you know, how does that yarn behave? Does it untwist? Does it start to bloom? Does it start to mat and then tangle? That's what the inspector is looking for, and you try to take pictures of that to provide, so the manufacturer can make a decision on that, because their warranties, there might be 3 or 4 different kinds of warranties, and they want to know. They're the ones that are making decisions. I observe and report, but I don't make the final decision. I don't own that carpet. The manufacturer really does, because they still hold that warranty in a sense, right? So they're the ones that make the final decision. I'll let them make that decision. I just provide the evidence.
Well, what is correct maintenance and what is incorrect maintenance? Because if I watch TV at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm watching an ad for a steam mop, they're telling me to use it on a hardwood floor. That's the manufacturer of the mop. So what we have in the hard surface line, that would be, you know, hardwood, laminates, and even our vinyls, using a steam mop, is inappropriate. We actually have to go as far as saying, do not do that. Oil soaps on urethane finishes. You got these companies that are advertising their product to use, but you've got the manufacturer saying, don't use it on mine.
So the rule to follow then is to follow the manufacturer's instructions for maintaining that product.
Get out of
But what is the difference between wet and damp mopping?
Okay, so what did you just say, Clayton, that we have to go back
Follow-
to the manufacturer,
You
follow
go right to the
manufacturer?
manufacturer's instructions for
Okay.
a particular product.
I just leaned behind me and I pulled, this is an actual piece of carton that came from solid wood, a box of solid wood. And I've highlighted a section here, and I'll read it. Maintenance. To maintain your hardwood floor, wipe with a damp cloth, rinse with vinegar and vinegar water solution.
What?
Wait.
No,
This is
finish that.
solid wood. This is solid wood, standard UV finish. The manufacturer goes on to say, for tougher stains, apply vinegar directly on the stain. Let stand for 2 to 3 minutes and wipe, rubbing vigorously.
oh my God.
Okay, that's a manufacturer of a wood floor.
There's
So
no-
if Mrs. Consumer pours vinegar on her floor, lets it stand for 2 to 3 minutes, what did she do wrong?
She followed the
Follow
instructions.
So
the
we know what
manufacturer's
she did
instructions.
wrong. But in the
Yeah.
courts, what did she do wrong?
Nothing. She follows instructions.
Okay, but what do we all know in the wood business?
Well, you don't
And-
put vinegar on UV.
Well, you don't
It's
leave
not
standing
on
water.
the-
You don't leave standing water on the
Yeah,
floor.
that's right in the manufacturer's instructions. So what is correct and what is incorrect maintenance?
Yeah, what's the
Clayton, great
difference?
point.
Yeah, well,
What's the definition of a damp mop?
I've been still asking every inspector, everyone out there, what's the difference between damp and wet mopping?
What's the definition of a damp mop?
Yeah, you can damp mop it, but you can't wet mop it. Well,
Well, if
What's
I had
the
to take a
difference between
stab
that?
at that, I would say it's a wet rag that's wrung out, so it's not dripping, and that's what you damp mop.
That's your interpretation.
No, yeah,
my
that's
interpretation.
right.
Somebody
That's
else's.
right.
You
So
heard it.
I say that to clear up those instructions, I say, you apply that solution on the floor, you look back, that should be dry within 2 minutes.
You heard it on
No.
this channel, folks. That's the interpretation of damp mopping. Wet mopping is when it's still dripping, and you're going to leave literally a reflective, shiny, wet.
You gotta be careful how you apply it, because if you spray apply it and you got bevel joints, where do you think the water is gonna channel to? It's gonna go right to that joint deep down, and it's gonna then possibly delaminate, swell up those joints.
A brushed finish, nightmare.
And guess what? When you use the detergent, it thins the water, it penetrates deeper.
Yeah.
Versus plain water. So it's
So
even
there's-
worse.
NWFA's guidelines, correct me if I'm wrong, Drew or Scott, say damp mopping once a month.
It does say that, but everything in the NWFA also always says, refer back to the manufacturer's instructions which supersede ours. So
Oh, sure.
anything the NWFA says, the manufacturer would supersede. So
Yes.
this would supersede what the NWFA says, but
Yes.
what do most professionals agree with? That manufacturer's instructions to the homeowner or NWFA's instructions?
I'm hoping that you're going to tell us that manufacturer is the exception.
This is a Canadian manufacturer out of Quebec, but that's all I'm going to say about that one because I don't want to throw them underneath the bus.
That's amazing. Well, let's see what the next slide is, because we're gonna. Oh, there you go. What is that? Is that damp mopping or wet mopping?
That's
It
what.
depends
Somewhere in
on the
between.
homeowner's interpretation.
It's a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's you can't really.
It's bad no matter what it is.
But for sure, if you've got white vinegar or vinegar period in that solution, you're in for trouble.
But when you live near an affluent neighborhood and you have cleaning staff come in to clean your house,
Yeah, you lost
they don't
control.
read instructions. They
Well,
just do how they did 50 years ago.
The wetter they
No, I
make
think
it,
it
the
is
better
bad.
it looks. Until it dries.
It's you have to have the instructions, plus you have to read the instructions, then you have to understand the instructions, and then the
Well, they
fourth
have to
one.
be clear.
And then, no,
and
and
correct.
the fourth point is you have to follow those instructions, and that's a long ways to get there.
I think one of the biggest challenges that anyone has in this industry, especially with any pre-finished floors, is educating the end user on how to maintain it. Because I would say most of the time people are clueless, and the people who should know better, the people like who sold it to them or installed it for them, should also be telling them, by the way, keep your humidity in this range, don't put water on the floor. You know, there should be some basic rules, but oftentimes you go there and you know that they have the cleaning lady who puts the the Pine Sol and water and wet mops the floor every week, and then they're wondering why all the finish is coming off, and they're saying the manufacturer's the flooring's garbage, but in actual fact they're systematically destroying it. And then when you point out that you shouldn't be doing that, and they go, well, nobody told me. How nobody sees the instructions. Even Drew, most of those instructions end up in the bin, whether they're good or bad.
Yeah,
They all end up in the container outside when the job's done.
This is one of those
you're right.
transitions between two trades. The floor covering installer finishes their trade, and then that sort of invisible baton is handed over to the maintenance people. And
Well, let's bring in another topic here while we're on it, and that's we were past few years we've switched over to a lot of oil floors, oil waxed floors, instead of our traditional coating of UV cured urethane, and people don't know how to maintain them. We get a lot of inspections, a lot of complaints. Well, I've had hardwood floors before, but maintaining them the same way. No, now you have an oiled floor that is different from a urethane coated floor.
Yeah, absolutely right.
They have to really look at instructions and follow them. They have
James,
to.
If it's wire brushed or something like that, then it's even, I mean, you're putting water on a wire brushed oak floor. That's
You're in trouble. James,
instant
we've
disaster.
got 2 minutes. So, you know,
Any outstanding questions?
the common repeat issues is another 3 days worth of conversation, but it just goes to show you how big this topic is. There's so much going on in flooring, and this is why you guys, you see it. I don't want to say you see it all, but you see a lot of it. And so what crosses your desk makes you more experienced than most in this industry. A great resource to keep in your contacts list to help you get through some of the inevitable problems that are going to come up. Everything from bond testing, moisture-related issues. We haven't even really talked about, you know, dry concrete, creaking floors, SPC joints is a new one that's just blown up. The SPC product just seems to break when you look at it. So this conversation is not over. But for today, because we have now come to the end of our hour, could have easily gone on with you guys for another 3. It's good conversation. I really enjoyed it. If there's any questions from the floor out there, we still have quite a few people on the call. Now's your time. You can unmute yourself and ask a question.
So while we're waiting for that, somebody did ask in the chat line that if those instructions that I held up were Lozons, and they're not. They're not Lozons. So
Yeah, I'd be surprised.
yeah.
I think there's a lot of manufacturing bad product out there, and it's hard to find a way to go against them because they're in another country. The instructions, they just look for any excuse to deny the claim, even though I feel the products are defective. And those ones are more challenging
Or
to deal
don't
with.
perform as they're promised to perform.
Yeah, well, I've done tests myself with other organizations, flooring stores, where you just take that product and have unlimited expansion space, perfect subfloor, all the ideal conditions. You've eliminated all the installation variables, and it's still squeaking.
Yeah.
That's factory. It shouldn't be squeaking. Those joints should not be moving when you walk on it. So over time, those joints are going to start breaking down and creating squeaks. That's what I'm finding out there. And it's the thing is, there's hundreds of manufacturers out there, and they're denying claims for any little excuse they can. And like I said, there's not a perfect installer out there. You're always going to find something. That's all they're looking for. Oh, they didn't put T-moldings at the doorways. Deny the claim. That's it. Avoid.
Products have to be realistic about, the whole process of getting it from the factory up into the container, out of the container into a warehouse, into a delivery truck, onto site, installed so that someone can make a living from those products. It has to be realistic. If you get products that are as strong and at the same time as weak as glass, it's just doesn't work for the industry. It's not fair on the installer.
Yeah.
It's burned.
Product's not good enough. There's not enough tolerance there to allow for some little defects here, like deficiencies. There's zero tolerance.
Yeah.
Well, what's not fair on the industry is that the flooring industry is constantly changing, which is a good thing. But when you bring out new products and there's a new method of handling it or installing it or maintaining it, there's so many failures along the way to get that across. And I'm just going to bring in one example where there's hundreds, but 20 years ago, we didn't have wide plank engineered flooring. Now, most of our products coming off the shelf are wide plank flooring that requires a glue assist. You know how it took me years. I went through this process of transition where I'm telling everybody, no, you have to glue assist it. That's why it's making a noise. Well, the manufacturer didn't say that, or nobody else knows this. Well, if you go on training, if you read instructions, if the manufacturer puts out proper instructions, we wouldn't have these failures. So I'd like to help everybody that I can prevent failures and not repeat it in the future. We had Carl Snego online. I work very closely with Carl. He has fantastic instructions. They do great product testing. So do many others, not just him, and prevent failures versus other manufacturers that are behind a step and they go through several tens of thousands of square feet of failure before they kind of correct something. So in the changing industry, we do have to go on training and stay connected with each other.
Yeah, isn't it frustrating how the construction industry and who knows, maybe it's the human race in general, but we deal with problems when the wheels come off, not even when they're squeaking. Everyone's moving so fast that until there's a real disaster, then we stop and look and ask the question, why did that happen? Gents, we're going to wrap it up. I think one of the key takeaways from this call is there's lots of inspectors out there. Only a handful are really good at what they do. We've connected the dots with some of those inspectors. We have a meeting every so often and talk about stuff like this, and they're great meetings. It's very insightful. And
all the other inspectors out there have the opportunity to rise to this too.
Totally.
With good reports. Keep that in mind. Other inspectors can go on training and can do the thorough investigations themselves to be one of those ones that are.
This is inclusionary, not exclusionary.
Exactly.
It's all about raising the bar. So, guys, Scott, Drew, Clayton, thank you so much for doing this panel.